Bonjour à tous. Bienvenue à la...
Hello, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 38.
Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and Status of Persons with Disabilities. Pursuant to the motion adopted on Thursday, April the 23rd, 2026, the committee is meeting on main estimates 2026-2027 for the first hour and on homelessness in Canada for the second hour, pursuant to the motion adopted on Monday, May the 4th, 2026. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members or witness will be appearing virtually online. Before we begin, I would remind all those in the room, please silence your devices, refrain from tapping the microphone boom for the benefit of our interpreters. You have the option of participating in the official language of your choice. Please select the correct channel to ensure you are on the language that you choose to participate in. If you're appearing virtually, click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language of your choice. If there is an interruption in translation, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it's corrected. Those that are appearing virtually have been sound tested, and the sound quality meets requirements for translation. As well, please direct all questions through I, the chair, and wait until I recognize you before proceeding. So again, pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, I will now call Vote 1 under the Department of Employment and Social Development and welcome Minister Haidu this morning. Welcome again, Minister. You do appear a lot here. Thank you. Attending is Paul Thompson, your Deputy Minister, Robert Wright, Deputy Minister of Labour and Associate Deputy Minister of Employment and Social Development, Cliff Growan, Associate Deputy Minister, Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada, Serena Francis, Chief Financial Officer. Minister Haidu, you have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, again, on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. I am with people I think you also know very well. Paul Thompson, Deputy Minister of VSDC, Cliff Groan, who's the Associate Deputy Minister of VSDC and Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada, Rob Wright, the Deputy Minister of Labour and Associate Deputy Minister of VSDC, and Serena Francis, the Chief Financial Officer. And I see there's a spelling mistake on your sign, Serena, but we will refer to our notes to make sure we say your name correctly. This is obviously a pivotal moment for all of Canada and Canadians, and our government has been working, as you know, to strengthen Canada's economic and social security and to give all Canadians a fair chance to succeed at every stage of life. And this includes helping Canadians build the skills that they need in a rapidly changing labour market. So our goal at ESDC is to ensure that young Canadians are ready to seize the opportunities of the future. Nous devons regarder la réalité en face. Le Canada doit composer avec une grave pénurie.
This reality we need to acknowledge. Canada is facing a serious shortage of skilled workers.
To meet that challenge by strengthening today's workforce and preparing Canadians for the jobs that the economy and businesses urgently need across the country. Central to our government's plan is building major infrastructure, more homes, and strong communities. We're building homes that Canadians can afford and that a new industry can take on the world. We're also modernizing critical infrastructure and strengthening our national defense capacity. And achieving all of those objectives requires a highly skilled workforce, which is why the Spring Economic Update announced a $6 billion nationwide effort to recruit, train, and hire 100,000 new Red Seal trades workers in the next 5 years. That is ambitious, and the strategy is focused, as I said, on 3 pillars. First of all, recruitment. Second of all, training and hiring. Collectively, we need to restore honor to the skilled trades and to promote them as the great paying careers they are to young Canadians. And that's why we're taking action. So we are investing $2 billion to support young Canadians to learn about and enter into the skilled trades. This investment will build on provincial and territorial work, provide paid entry-level work experience, opportunities to connect with employers, and the support needed to pursue a career in the skilled trades. We will also help employers cover up to $10,000 of an apprentice's first-year salary to ensure those skilled trades workers have a place to practice their skills and learn and then refine them. We will modernize the Red Seal program. We'll expand the Union Training and Innovation Program to support certificates and Red Seal trades with $331 million in funding over 5 years, starting in 26-27. And as a direct financial support, apprentices will also receive a $400 weekly top-up while they attend their in-class training, in addition to EI benefits to which they're eligible. We'll also support employees during periods of layoff in their training and make sure that they have what they need to stay on the pathway of completing that Red Seal. I'm looking directly at Mr. Reynolds because you've been through that journey and you know how perilous it can be. We will also provide a one-time $5,000 apprenticeship completion bonus to those that obtain certification in a Red Seal trade. Les mesures proposées nous aideront à mobiliser les jeunes.
The proposed measures will help us mobilize youth, but at the end of the day, it comes down to affordability.
To Canada student grants and the temporary increase to the weekly Canada student loan limit of $300 for the 2026-27 academic year. About 571,000 students are expected to benefit from the increase to non-repayable grants, and 422,000 students could benefit from the weekly loan limit increase. And these measures will help ensure Canadians can access the education and training they need to participate fully in Canada's economy. Les mesures renoncées dans le budget de 2025.
The workforce measures in Budget 2025 were meant to tackle immediate challenges. With the Spring Economic Update 2026, we have turned to proactive measures. This includes the Canada Strong Fund.
Starts with investing at home. And since September 2025, the government has invested more than $126 billion to advance major projects across energy, critical minerals, and transportation infrastructure. The Spring Economic Update announced the government's intention to create the Canada Strong Fund. Through an initial federal contribution of $25 billion, the fund will invest in strategic projects and companies that keep us competitive. And we won't do it alone. Canadian companies, alongside global investors, are helping build the energy, transportation, and telecommunications infrastructure that will bring Canada into the next generation. So, Mr. Chair, building a strong workforce requires continued effort and investment, but we're well equipped to meet these challenges. This is how we build Canada strong for all. Thank you very much.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. We will begin with Mr.
Thank you, Minister.
Good morning, Minister. To justify sending airline workers back to work, you claim that it was necessary to prevent disruption of shipments of organs and life-saving pharmaceuticals. Was that claim true?
It was, Mr. Speaker. In fact, airlines not only transport people, but they transport a tremendous amount of cargo, including critical medical equipment.
Okay, so it was your view or your position that the strike was going to cause a shortage in the supply of these materials? Is that true?
Mr. Speaker, airlines regularly transport more than humans. They transport critical ingredients, medication, and yes, even live human
I understand
organs.
that, Minister, but you said that this was a risk to the safety of Canadians, implying that there wasn't capacity available on other airlines. Was it actually true that this strike posed a risk to the safety of Canadians in the way that you described?
Mr. Speaker, the question has been asked and answered, and I would reiterate that, yes, the briefings I received included the disruption not only to human travel, but certainly to the transportation of many critical ingredients, including medical ingredients.
So you're claiming that you were briefed to that effect. I wonder, just Mr. Thompson, can you advise the committee whether you or other officials briefed Minister Haidu that shortages of organs and critical pharmaceuticals would result from the continuation of the strike?
So that.
It's a yes or no. Did you brief the minister to that effect?
Well,
Not
Mr. Wright
me
was
personally.
Not there.
I was. This is the.
Did officials brief the minister to that effect?
We can certainly do some follow-up on that.
Okay, so you'll undertake to come back to the committee on that matter. Okay, thank you very much. Minister, 3 weeks ago, Conservatives announced a proposal for substantial reforms to parental leave to make the system more flexible, allowing parents to pause and resume their leave, to learn while on leave, and to offer paid caregiving services to friends and family while on leave. At the time, you said you'd look at the proposals. Thank you for that. 3 weeks on, I wonder if you can share if these are proposals that you would be prepared to implement.
Mr. Speaker, we've done a tremendous amount of work on parental leave, and we're constantly reviewing the measures that are available for parents, and we'll continue to look at those proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. You did say you'd look at the constructive proposals we put forward from the opposition. I wonder if you have any feedback on these specific proposals. If you're not prepared to provide that feedback yet, I wonder if you could undertake to come back to the committee with that feedback, perhaps in writing.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What's a timeline that's fair to you and your department?
We'll get back to you on the timeline as well.
Okay.
I'll confer with the department.
All right. Thank you. We'll look forward to the feedback on that proposals. I can tell you that people who are even traditional Liberal supporters online have shown great support for that proposal so far. I think it's something that could be an area of consensus and common action to make life easier for parents. One of the recent recommendations of this committee report on youth unemployment was to apply strict penalties to companies hiring illegal workers. Do you support that recommendation?
Yes. I mean, we have actually an enforcement branch through the labor team that specifically looks at undocumented illegal workers. Of course, we do this in partnership with IRCC, but in terms of our role, we are specifically there to enforce the Canada Labour Code for federally regulated workers and to make sure that anyone who's using temporary foreign workers is complying with the LMIA process.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that. I think that's clear. Do you think it's appropriate for the government to give public subsidies to companies that have been found guilty of hiring illegal workers?
Listen, I'm sure you're referring to a specific case. We're always interested in examining those specific cases, and I'd be happy to look at that if you provide the specific case.
Sure, your government is aware of the specific case because it was provided to me in an order paper question. A case of a company that it's called Ikabashi LPC in New Brunswick. The LPC doesn't refer to the Liberal Party, I assume, but it's a seafood processing company. They received subsidies from your government on multiple occasions after they had fired Canadian workers and illegally employed foreign nationals. Is there any explanation for why a company that fired Canadian workers to replace them with illegally hired foreign nationals would receive multiple rounds of government subsidy?
I will look into the case and come back to you. It sounds concerning to me, and it will depend on which department provided what funding, but I'm interested to know more about that.
Thank you, Minister. It was information that was provided to me through an order paper question, so I know the government is already aware of it and has been aware of it for some time. But I'll look forward to your follow-up on that.
Well, as a minister, I'm saying I'm not.
No,
so
I
understand.
It wasn't your department that provided the subsidy. It was Fisheries and Oceans. But
right, so that's why I have no awareness of it.
Given the
so once
subject
I
we're
have
discussing,
the ability to dig in, we'll certainly come back to you.
Thank you.
It sounds deeply concerning.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that feedback as well. Youth unemployment is now at 14.3%. It's gone up half a point in a single month. I'd like to understand what, in the view of the government, success looks like. Do you have a goal or a target in terms of where you'd like youth unemployment to be in the months ahead?
Well, I want to first of all thank the committee for, I think, a very thorough report on youth unemployment.
I do just have 15 seconds left, so I want to get a sense of the answer to that question.
Obviously, we are working really closely with this committee, with members of Parliament across the aisle to reduce youth unemployment. One great way to reduce youth unemployment would have been to vote for the spring economic update.
Do you have a target, Minister, for youth unemployment?
It's
a simple question, and I'm running out of time.
Access to the skilled trades, a great career path.
Yeah. Do you have a response to my question?
My response is,
the question is, do you have
my
a
response
target?
is every time that we propose action for youth unemployment, your party votes against it. And the question would be to me, why is it that you're so opposed to the supports for young people?
28 seconds. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Janis. Before I would just please ask members to respect the interpreters, and one speaking at a time would be most beneficial. Monsieur Villeneuve, pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Villeneuve, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. Very happy to see you here this morning. Over the last 2 weeks in my riding, I met with a number of citizens, and I had a coffee with a number of them. A number of people were there. I heard a lot, about affordability. I think that's something that a lot of people are talking about, and also about opportunities for our young people. We heard about concerns, and we have a lot of ambitious projects underway by our government. What I'd like this morning is for you to take the time to explain how the Canada Strong team is going to help Canada to recruit and train and retain specialized workers for housing and the other projects that are underway. Thank you for the question. It's an opportunity, I think, not only for young people, but for everyone across the country.
Beaux jobs, parce qu'il y a
These are great jobs
qui est très
because they are high-paying jobs, and there are a lot of benefits, and often
les petites
those who are rich, well, pardon me, my vocabulary is limited,
for young people, but making sure that we have the skilled trades in this country to meet the ambition of the time. And in fact, I'm glad to hear you're speaking with your constituents, because I am as well with mine. And I am visiting in Northern Ontario. As a matter of fact, last week I visited a small area called Marathon, Ontario, which is experiencing a mining boom. And one of the things employers were telling me is they're having a hard time finding skilled trades workers that can work in specific areas of the mining industry. Both building the mines in some cases, but also later on in servicing the mines and in servicing the equipment that goes into the mines. I will note that there's over 50 Red Seal trades, and so the variety amongst the Red Seals is quite large. So this program will provide an opportunity to build on some of the work that some provinces and territories are doing to introduce people to the trades, to ensure people have an opportunity to feel what it's like to work. These will be paid experiences. Also to support people who are already in the pipeline of skilled trades training. My son is an operating engineer, so I've had the opportunity to see how challenging it can be for someone to get from the first days of their training to the Red Seal certification. And we're very excited about the supports in place that will help people through that journey. And finally, there are many employers that would possibly consider higher Red Seal. Small businesses often feel it's unaffordable. There is such an advantage to training your own talent, though, and so we'll be hopefully recruiting more employers, in particular small employers, but all size employers, to hire those first-year apprentices to make sure that apprentices who are completing their training have a place to get those hours. And so the process of certification is both steady and as well hands-on learning with a Red Seal journey person. And we have to plug these holes, if you will, in the gaps of the journey so that we can make sure we graduate more Red Seal professionals. The numbers are not the greatest. It's about 32% overall of Red Seal workers that complete the training and get their Red Seal certification. So you can imagine the frustration of young people or any age people who enter the skilled trades and then find that their pathway to the certification, which is when you really start to make the money and when you really are able to use your skills in a wide variety of ways, you can imagine the frustration people feel when they're not able to complete that after making significant investments in their pathway. We've been holding roundtables around the country with unions and employers and technical institutions and training institutions to talk about the plan, and it is landing very, very well. People feel that we have, in fact, identified some of the significant gaps. We also have a plan to work with provinces and territories, in particular in the recruit area, because some provinces are starting co-op credits with colleges, for example, in high schools, reintroducing trades into the high schools, which those of us my age know that that is part of the challenge we've had. Over the last 2 decades or more, there's been a diminishment of the value of a skilled trades job, a skilled trades career. And in fact, one tradesperson said, and it's in my notes, that we must work together to restore the honor to the skilled trades. These are highly technical, highly science-based, lots of math, but lots of intelligence goes into being a tradesperson. And somehow society has, over the last several decades, undermined the value of these workers and their skills. And so I think that part of restoring honor is having such a prominent program that says these are worthy, valuable jobs. You are worthy, valuable trainers as Red Seal journey people, and these careers are, needed by the country. We actually cannot build Canada strong without talented, skilled tradespeople. Thank you for the question.
Merci. Il me reste combien de temps, Monsieur le Président?
Thank you. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair? Oh, 30 seconds. And very quickly, Minister. I'd like to come back to Summer Jobs Canada. We have some in my writing, about 100,000 possibilities. How will this allow young people to get significant job experience, work experience, and so that they can really make meaningful connections with employers?
Merci, Madame.
How many minutes do I have? Seconds? None. Okay. Great program. Everybody has Canada Summer Jobs in the writing.
Madame LaRouche, pour 6 minutes.
Ms. LaRouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Minister. I have a number of subjects to address with you, and I can see things are moving along very quickly. I was also in my writing a lot over the last few weeks. Now, benefits for seniors. We know that there are expenses for this, and despite having a higher budget, 65 and over individuals were excluded from these increases, including old age security. Why this inequality? Thank you for the question. For seniors, they have a higher cost of living for those of them who are older, and that's why the government is approaching benefits this way.
The older you get, the more requirements there are to be able to stay at home. And this benefit was introduced during COVID, you may remember. It was very specific about trying to support older adults age at home. In fact, people need assistive devices. They often need specialized care. They may need meal delivery. They may need transportation support. And this increase was meant to address the very specific costs that older people face as they age and help support them stay in place, because if you'll recall, in COVID, one of the features of COVID were that the deaths were extremely high in long-term care.
Madame la Ministre, je vous ai laissé répondre, mais ça ne répond pas.
Minister, I'm letting you answer, but in fact, you're not answering the question. We have seniors who are living in places of 65% of the budget, and they're late with their rent. I heard about the rising grocery costs. So with the rising living costs, one can't recognize that there hasn't been an increase for old age security for 65 to 74-year-old individuals. It makes no sense. How does the government intend to help vulnerable families and these individuals in the coming years? Because currently what you've put in place does not work. There are more and more people who are ending up in the streets, and they're relying on food banks and so on. That's what I've been hearing on the ground, Madam Minister. How are you going to increase this? Well, it's not true that there was no increase for seniors, no increase of the rates.
Inflation, and in fact go up each year, and so there is an indexation of all of the benefits that seniors receive regardless of what each category they're in. I'd also say that low-income Canadians on June 5th are going to receive the essential goods and groceries benefit that will double essentially the GST. Then that will benefit people living in who are older, who are facing high costs of living. And look, every step of the way, we are focused on making sure that Canadians have what they need during this extraordinary time. So what I would say is it's important not to provide misinformation to Canadians. In fact, all benefits are indexed to inflation, and each year they are increased based on the inflationary rate.
Madame la ministre, je vous laisse répondre. J'essaie de respecter les temps, mais
Minister, I'm trying to stay within my time and listen to your answer. Now, the indexation method that you referred to, some seniors were insulted. They had an increase of only $2 or $3 for their check. They can barely get an extra coffee with that. Is that indexing to inflation? Is that what you're referring to? That doesn't work. That needs to be reviewed. I know that the government boasts about the Horizons program and saying it's another way to help seniors. This year, at $50,000, the total budget was increased by how much? Can you confirm the amount for New Horizons, please?
Officials for that.
Thanks very much for the question. Merci beaucoup pour les questions.
Thank you very much for the question. We are increasing the amount available for projects, as you already said. But at the same time, the totals for the budget, well, we could get back to you in writing. And by how much? Because it's no longer 25,000, it's now 50,000. So was the envelope doubled? We can get back to you in writing. We want to make sure that we give you the right answer. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate it. Another thing, what I heard over the last few weeks, for the business numbers, it's more and more complicated to fill out a New Horizons form. For example, for the Cercle des Fermières, which is an amazing organization in Quebec, a lot of them are excluded from this. There's the national club of Cercle des Fermières that has a registration number, but the local ones don't. And a lot of people are reacting in the regions, and there's a lot of active senior women who are able to get together because of this group. Now, we're asking your department, will something be done to allow these groups to apply starting June 2nd? Thank you very much for the question once again. That's an important question. We're currently making sure that Government of Canada programs are solid and that we can combat fraud. Yes, but are you going to relax the rules for the Cercle des Fermières? Because July 14th, that's in the middle of the summer, and the deadline for the budgets is in the middle of the summer or just before Christmas, so that's not easy for organizations.
May I answer, Mr. Chair?
Short.
Why don't you forward the specific case to my office, and we'll take a look at that specific case.
Merci, Madame Larouche. Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Larouche. Ms. Goodrich.
Chair, both my parents were Red Seal tradespeople, some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my entire life. Hardworking people have always been tradespeople. For the last more than 10 years, your government vilified energy workers, made all kinds of heinous statements against oil sands workers, the energy industry in general, and I fully agree. We need to have more tradespeople. That is clear. Conservatives have been saying that for the entire time. I'm glad to see you guys have finally come on board with this. But do you not think that the actions that your government and the cabinet you sat in for the last 10 years has something to do with the fact that people weren't going into the trades when you were saying that it was the gendered impact of the construction industry having impacts on communities and all of the other stuff that were keeping young people from going into the trades because they didn't see a future in those industries?
Well, I think That is completely false, Ms. Goodrich. And in fact, we have been supporting workers ever since I've been in this place. We've had a great relationship with the Canadian Building Trades Union. We've had a great relationship with energy workers. We've had a great relationship with tradespeople. In fact, this is not the first time that we've funded unions training, because we believe unions do a fantastic job of training. Institutions as well, polytechnic institutions do a fantastic job of training trades, and we've supported them as well. This is an addition to the work that we've done. We've promoted trades, we've offered completion grants, and we've had committees for impacted workers. We've supported impacted workers with a number of different measures, including retraining opportunities. And Ms. Goodrich, I would think that it would be
the just
you
transition
that is actually talking
the just
down.
transition and telling people in my community and across the energy industry that their jobs shouldn't exist and that you're going to transition them out. That is not anything. That did not do anything to get more people into the trades. I'm just being quite frank with you.
Well, you are actually presenting your opinion, Ms. Goodrich, which is different than evidence. And so what I would say is that it's important when we speak about matters that we are clear that it is an opinion versus evidence. And you're absolutely wrong. In fact, the Sustainable Jobs Committee had a number of tradespeople, including retired tradespeople, leaders of unions and organizations that knew there was an imperative to support workers when industry changes.
Thank you.
And industry does change.
So do you believe that the government should slow the growth of for-profit childcare?
I believe that public funds should primarily go to public institutions, and I believe that we've worked flexibly with a number of different provinces on privatization when there aren't other solutions. I think that the agreements with provinces and territories are carefully crafted to make sure that we keep quality and equity in these programs.
Does the government think that female small business owners operating childcare centers are the problem in creating solutions for childcare? Because that's
in Alberta,
reality.
For example, there is a 45% ratio of privatization in terms of the funds that the federal government supports the province with, and so we have a healthy balance in that province as well as in other provinces.
Okay, so why not in every province? Why just in provinces like Alberta?
Well, some provinces like Saskatchewan have always had a public system, and they're not interested in privatization. They have a public system, and
they're not interested. That's interesting.
Well, what I'm saying is their system was built on a public. Their system is built on a public framework, and so they have worked largely within their public framework.
Minister,
and so I would say that different provinces have different approaches.
There are more families.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could we please allow the minister to finish responding to the questions?
That's not how this works.
Read the book. Members' time. Order, members. It's the member's time, and the member has the right to question the witness as the member chooses, as long as it doesn't get into harassment, which is not occurring. Ms. Goodrich.
The policies your government has put in place is putting small female businesses out of business because you are preventing them from accessing government funds in so many cases. And this is having a major impact. Families are stuck on wait lists. They cannot access care. Does that concern you?
Of course, we are working with all the provinces and territories to both reduce fees and increase spots. And I would say that we are seeing great progress, including in Alberta, where the average daily price for childcare is $15 a day, saving families up to $13,700 per family. So this is quite an accomplishment. And for a government and for an opposition party that talks.
Yes, it is the member's time.
Has the government met their target for space creation?
Some provinces have done better than others in terms of space creation.
So the answer is no.
And in fact, we are working on the next round of plans with provinces and territories to make sure that they reach those commitments.
But so far, the answer is no.
What I would say is we're seeing different accomplishments across the country, and some provinces have met
Which provinces have met their space targets?
Let me just look at my chart here. Nova Scotia is very close to their space target. Prince Edward Island has, Quebec has increased, has actually exceeded their space target.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Mr. Saini. Mr. Saini, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Minister and member of the team. Thank you to have you here. Minister, during the spring economics update, including measures to modernize the disability tax credit, how will these changes make it easier for Canadians with disability to access benefit they are entitled to?
Well, one of the concerns we heard were the cost of filling out the forms and getting medical support to fill out the form. So we've broadened both the eligibility of who can help fill out the form and provided a credit back to people who are applying for the disability tax credit so that the $150 on average fee will be reimbursed.
Thank you. Minister, we know that you have been working very hard to find solutions for workers who have been impacted by tariffs. What have your department done to make sure workers are supported in these challenging times?
Well, thank you. And I think it's such an important question. And although I know that across the aisle we hear a lot of mocking whenever we speak about EI, but in fact, if you've ever lost your job, as I have, EI is actually a very important component of recovery when a person experiences job loss. And so we've done a couple of things. One, we've increased something called the LMDAs, which is a transfer to provinces and territories who are closest to the ground, and we've worked in partnership with the provinces and territories to make sure that if a person's job is threatened, that they are immediately supported with wraparound supports, with support to immediately access employment insurance, but broader than that, the opportunity to retrain, the opportunity to get support for updating their resume, updating their ability to do that job search. We've also extended EI for long-tenured workers, so the older you are, the longer you've been in a place, the harder it can be to find a job. And so we've extended EI for those long-tenured workers. We've made it easier for people to get EI. We've waived the 1-week waiting period, and we've allowed people to keep monies on separation, which means anything that's coming to you for vacation or sick time or other kinds of benefits are not actually held back from your EI. And this is to make sure people aren't feeling that financial crisis immediately. And finally, we've offered work sharing to workplaces that believe that even though they're facing a downturn, that they see a light at the end of the tunnel, they have new customers, they're pivoting to a new approach, and we've allowed companies to train workers, keep them on EI and partial salary to keep them retained to that workforce. Because in fact, what employers will say is if they have to close their doors completely and then resume business, it can be very difficult to get those workers back. And so the real focus is trying to keep everybody attached to the workforce first, but if they're threatened, making sure they have the support financially and practically to find that next job.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, the government has taken action to strengthen workers' rights, including anti-scab legislation and support for union training. How do these measures support fair workplace and strong labor markets or strong labor relations?
We've actually done more than that over the last 10 years. In fact, we started with repealing some very harmful conservative legislation that had just passed under the Harper Conservatives. Reviled legislation that made it harder for unions to organize, that made it harder for unions to bargain, and that made it harder for unions to collectively work with their members. And so we repealed that. In fact, it was the first act of the Trudeau government in 2015 was to restore the right to unions to be able to bargain and to organize. The second thing that we did was introduce pay equity legislation for federally regulated workers, and that was again very early. So that was about making sure that workers had opportunities to be paid equal pay for work of equal value. We also introduced harassment and violence prevention legislation for federally regulated workers. This was a gap, believe it or not, that existed in the federally regulated space. And as you know, we've not stopped. We've taken many other actions, including anti-scab legislation, including federal minimum wage that is indexed to inflation, including adding sick days and paid sick days to the Canada Labour Code. The list goes on. But this has all been with the focus of creating a strong federal labor force and inspiring our, in some cases, meeting the provincial codes, and in other cases, inspiring a level playing field for workers across the country.
Thank
Sini,
you.
Madame LaRouche, pour 2 minutes 30.
Ms. LaRouche, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, because the time is flying. The ministerial plan intends on bringing down expenses by $65 million for 2026-2027. What services will be affected? In 30 seconds, please.
J'ai d'autres questions pour vous. Soyez brève.
And I have other questions for you, so please be brief.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Nous avons
Thank you for the question. We
très important pour le
are going to protect. In fact, this is very important for these budget cuts. We are focusing on administrative aspects
le reste du ministère.
and sectors that support the rest of the department and minimize the impact on service delivery. These are especially administrative things that will be affected by these reductions. It's about efficiencies.
Parlez de la problématique.
Minister, you spoke earlier about the problems. Well, you talked about summer jobs and the problem of youth employment. Despite all of that, I'm getting resolutions from municipalities. Budgets are quite tight, and it's difficult to meet organizations' needs and the needs of municipalities in a context where young people are having a hard time finding jobs. But there are a number of community organizations that are still finding the summer jobs program too rigid. What measures could be implemented to simplify access to that funding? Because clearly there are people who don't qualify, and young people won't have a job this summer because of it.
Disagree. We have 100,000 jobs and an increase of youth summer jobs by about 40,000, and we don't think we're going to have a problem filling those spots. So this is not, this is a program about youth employment. We usually get more applications than we actually can fund. And so we work very closely with all of you, as you know. There's a department social screening. You have an opportunity as an MP to be able to influence what jobs will be available in your riding for a variety of reasons. For example, in my riding, I have to reorganize.
Oui, mais Madame la Ministre, il y a plus de demandes que de besoins.
Yes, but Minister, there's more requests than offers. So there are going to be some municipalities and organizations that are going to write to you to say that they couldn't get those jobs. Thank you, Ms. LaRouche.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, Minister, for being here. I just need to follow up on comments you made to my colleague, because you cannot sit here and say that collectively we need to restore honor to the skilled trades and to promote them as their great careers for our young people, but continue to vilify skilled trade workers. It is your government that suggested that bringing construction workers into rural communities had harmful social and gender impacts. And it is your government that has continued to vilify the Canadian energy sector and those that work in that sector. So I will not take you saying one thing out of one side of your mouth and your actions doing another. That is the truth. Your government has never supported the trade workers.
Well, I would counter that with your party has voted repeatedly against trade workers. Every time we make investments
Prime Minister
in trade,
Justin Trudeau in Argentina,
you don't like this answer, do you?
It's my time.
I'm chair. I have the floor. Please, if you're going to direct a question, give a reasonable time to the witness to respond.
It was a statement.
And then thank the witness, and then tell them you have another question you want to move on.
Okay, well, I will say to my statement that I made that it was your leader, Justin Trudeau, who at a G20 summit in Argentina said that there are gender impacts when you bring construction workers into a rural area. There are social impacts because they're mostly male construction workers. And by being the head of a state and saying something like that on the world stage sends a message. And that message was sent. So I would like to ask you now, those were my comments, and pointing out the hypocrisy of your government and the time that you have sat in cabinet since you were a Trudeau-era appointed minister as well. We know that Canada's natural resource sector remains one of our country's largest sources of high-paying entry-level and skilled trades jobs, particularly for our young workers, which you did allude to in your opening remarks. And during our youth employment study, we also heard that these sectors are facing barriers to investment and expansion. We know, and as we have heard in not just this committee, but committees across the precinct, that Liberal anti-energy policies like Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, and the shipping ban are discouraging investment and sending jobs out of our country down south. So given your government's stated goal of building Canada strong and this restoring honor to the trades, you must be supporting scrapping these harmful bills that are choking our economy and holding back job creation, correct?
I think that I'd like to go back to the hypocrisy statement.
Sorry, Minister, it is my time. I have given my statements. I have done what the chair has said. I have moved on, and I've asked my question. So I would expect decorum and respect from you to answer the question that I'm asking. This is not question period. We know we never get the answers, which is why.
Point of order.
Clearly state the point of order.
The point of order is that the member has asked a question. The minister should be able, the witness should be able to give a response.
Thank you, Ms. Church. Thank you. I would again remind the member, when you're directing a question or a statement, to give a reasonable time for the witness to respond and then move on. It is the member's time. Ms. Falk,
thank you. So my question was, you must be supporting the scrapping of these policies because it is preventing youth in Canada from going into the trades, the well-paying jobs, which you alluded to. I agree, trades are great paying jobs. They give a great work-life balance a lot of times. They are able to, these people are able to provide for their families. So it would make sense then, with what you said in your opening remarks, that you do not support these anti-development, anti-energy policies that your government has pushed through.
Well, I was a Trudeau minister when we built a pipeline, and I will say that continually we have supported energy projects across the country, and most recently it was very exciting to hear about the sale of LNG to Germany through Silicium. Which is obviously partially Indigenous
thank you, Minister.
owned.
My question was specifically about... Minister,
Mr. Chair,
question...
I would like to be able to finish my sentence.
And I would like an answer, but you're not answering the question. I asked specifically about the energy policies like Bill C-69 and C-48, which was the tanker ban that your government pushed through under Trudeau. And you're not answering that. I will note as well that we've had investment leave this country. We had TMX, which was in Canada. It was made such a debacle by over-regulations with your government, with you sitting at the helm next to Justin Trudeau, that it left the country. We sold it down south, and now they are making money. Our energy projects, they produce revenue for the government, correct?
Mr. Speaker,
yes or no?
Mr. Speaker.
Okay, so that revenue that is collected from the government goes to our social programs. It goes to our seniors. It goes to our $10 a day daycare. It goes to parents with the child benefit. It is baffling to me that your government doesn't want young people to go into the trades. If it did, it would be repealing this legislation, and we would be having energy projects across this country.
Mr. Speaker. Order. We do have before the ministers appearing here on supplementaries, and I would ask all members to keep within the general context of the subject matter before the committee. Minister, you have 10 seconds to respond. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's clear that the member opposite doesn't want a response. She wants to berate the minister instead of looking at the incredible investment and growth that's happening in this country, partially stimulated by Bill C-5, but certainly by the Prime Minister, who's been working day and night to make sure that Canada is seen not only as a great country to invest in, but a great country to procure from.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Falk. We'll conclude with Ms. Church.
Thank you, Mr.
For 5
Chair.
minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's always a pleasure to be at HUMA. Thank you, Minister and officials, for appearing. Minister, I just wonder, following up on that last exchange, whether you would like to comment on some of the reactions to the Team Canada Strong plan. You and I have both met with various organizations and institutions across the country who have provided feedback to our plan to recruit, train, and hire up to 100,000 new red-skilled trades workers. What have you heard in reaction to this plan?
It's been, thank you very much for the question, and thanks for giving me a few moments to respond. It's been an incredible launch, actually. We've heard real enthusiasm from pretty much all of the sectors engaged. We've heard from employers that this is exactly what they need in terms of recruiting that next generation of talent. We've heard from unions that they're very thrilled with the support for their members, in particular their apprentices that are often do face low completion rates related largely to financial concerns, and many of the measures that we are supporting individuals with are financial boosts to make sure that it's not money that makes them drop out of the trades. We've heard from trainers that they see such merit in the attract stage of the plan, which is to partner with youth-serving organizations, colleges, high schools to expose young people to the trades, contrary to what the member opposite was saying. In fact, over the last decade, many governments have worked to attract people to the trades. We have seen an aging population in the skilled trades. My son is 29 years old, and he is the oldest operator on the job site. So you can imagine the challenges that employers are having. In fact, they're not, and it's a variety of different skilled trades. It's not just building trades, it's certainly all of the automotive trades. And so there's just this passion and enthusiasm across the country, and the $6 billion investment, which the party opposite voted against. They like to talk about supports for workers, supports for youth, but they vote against it every time, which to me is quite shocking. Quite shocking, in fact, because this is, one would think, something they would support. It's, skilled trades, it's big projects, it's unions, it's youth, it's pretty much everyone. So I think there's just an excitement and enthusiasm. Everybody wants to help. Everybody has put their hand up to help. This is also very exciting. And there are some really, really good ideas out there about how to utilize this program in a way that will help us launch that next generation of skilled trades workers.
Ms. Harrison.
Good morning, Minister. You and I have spoken about this. I come from a skilled trades family. My dad and brother are members of the International Union of Operating Engineers.
Yes.
And my childhood was marked with traveling Ontario and Northern Ontario, visiting my dad. He passed away in 2010 of pancreatic cancer. But this is a moment in time I wish he'd seen, and seen our government's commitment and passion behind supporting and developing Canada's own skilled trade sector. And I was recently at Fleming College, which has the Kawartha Trades and Technology Centre, and they are over the moon about what we are doing. And I visited with lots of students, especially in the welding sector, and they don't even have enough spots to host the amount of students who would like to go into specifically welding. My dad was a self-taught welder, a self-taught heavy equipment mechanic, but he was highly sought after. He spent a lot of time actually in Fort McMurray in the oil sands, and as did my brother. And one of the things I think when we talk about this that sometimes is missing, yes, really well-paying jobs, highly skilled jobs, but it's the pride that comes with being a skilled tradesperson. And now that my dad is gone, when I travel the country, there is a physical manifestation of my dad across this country because of the projects he was part of. And I think that's, as we talk about this, and I feel our government has really encompassed how important these jobs are, and we have approached this in a really thoughtful way of how we make sure people come from start to finish through the red steel trades. So if there's still some time left, could you elaborate about some of the supports of how we're going to see from start to finish people make it through a Red Seal certification.
Well, thank you so much for telling the story of your dad, and that's the story of so many tradespeople, self-taught, certified in a time where it was completely different. And they're the, I don't know if your dad's retired or not, but those are the journeymen that are now training the next generation, the journey people that are now training the next generation. I would say that your dad traveled a lot, and just to sort of tag into, I think it was Ms. Falk's comments about, the challenges that men in particular face when they're far away from home. And I want to acknowledge how hard that was on your family. My son also travels for work, and there is a deep concern amongst the trades about the mental health supports for men in particular who are often far away from home, women too, but often men who are far away from home, feeling lonely, feeling bored in some cases. You're in a work camp far away. And I would just say that that is something that's come up, and we are working to support the full support for people who are far away.
Yes.
That is explicitly the comments that the minister said did not exist. She is literally just saying them right now.
Did not say that.
No. Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Thank you,
Yeah,
Ms.
what I'm saying
Harrison.
is what actually
Thank you, Minister. This part of the meeting has concluded. Thank you for a very spirited round of questions. Before we do,
Chair,
sit still.
Point of order. The minister is scheduled to be here for an hour, which isn't that long. We have time for another round of opposition questions.
Thank you, Mr. Janis. We're moving to the votes,
Chair,
which I have to conclude.
No, we're not moving to the votes. We have 5 minutes to allow questions from the opposition. The minister is scheduled to appear for an hour. It is on the agenda for the minister to appear for an hour, and there is time for.
Thank you, Mr.
We have
Janis.
very little time with the minister. In general, the minister is here. I want to respect her time and the commitment she made to us, and ask. I'm happy to split the remaining time with the government, which is more than I should offer.
Okay,
frankly,
then
but
to accommodate, I will give one question to the opposition. One question.
2.5 minutes each.
No, two. I'll give you 2-minute question.
2 minutes.
And a 2-minute. Yes, I'll
During
allow
your
the
2 minutes.
minister to finish her. I will suspend the meeting if order is not restored. Minister, you respond. You conclude your question, your answer shortly, and then I'll give one question to the opposition, 2 minutes, and 2 minutes to the government. To the government.
For time, and then now.
Do you want to suspend, or do you want the question? Minister, finish your comments, and then we'll go, and then we'll conclude.
So I will finish my comments. I wanted to say 2 things. One, unions are very concerned about the supports for their members when they're pursuing labor mobility, which is a big part of life in the trades. And so there's a lot of work happening with unions around mental health in the workforce, especially with remote working, including things like physical activity, opportunities for entertainment. Many unions talk about the unsuitable accommodation that is provided by the employer, and the advocacy they're doing to get better accommodation for people that are working far away. So I just wanted to acknowledge your dad.
Thank you. Mumbling in the background is not adding to anything. Mr. Janis, your question. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Just to follow up on claims about the airline workers' strike leading to shortages of organ and tissue, Blacklock's did an ATIP on this, which revealed that there was simply no evidence for that claim. Was the department's response to the ATIP not accurate?
Mr. Speaker, there's evidence that comes in from a number of different sources. I was briefed that there would be a shortage of medical supplies, including potentially organs.
And was that briefing, did that include departmental officials?
Mr. Speaker, what I was informed by the number of briefings that I had was this was going to create critical shortages of medical supplies.
Were officials present or providing that briefing?
Mr. Speaker, I've said 3 times now, I received a briefing. And there were many people working on this, and it was undeniably clear.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, Minister. It's just that the department had absolutely no record of any of those conversations. So it does seem that the precise correlation between the information you communicated and the facts is such as to cause epistemological problems of sufficient magnitude as to lay upon the logical and semantic resources of the English language
means as well.
a heavier burden than they can reasonably be expected to bear.
Mr. Speaker, when there is a labor disruption such as the size of the one that occurred last summer, there are many disruptions, including for the cargo that Air Canada was supplying around the country and world.
The department has no record of you being briefed on that. You claim you've been briefed. You won't tell us if officials were present or not for that briefing. I'll go back to the officials. Do the officials have any awareness of normally when there are briefings that take place, senior officials are present, that there's a record of that. And yet this ATIP provided no response. So was the ATIP accurate? Does the department have any such information?
I do find it interesting, Mr. Speaker, that the member has never been a minister and he normally knows what briefings are.
I was a ministerial staffer. I know how
Mr.
briefings
Dennis.
work.
Ms. Church,
I've sat
for
in
2
on many
minutes.
of them.
Ms. Church.
Minister, I know how important the provinces and territories are as partners in delivering on employment and our skilled trades objectives. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to how the government's labor market agreements with provinces and territories are also so important in supporting training and upskilling and our workers affected by tariffs.
Thank you very much. In fact, the majority of training, including Red Seal workers, is jurisdictionally the responsibility of the provinces and territories, and we are there as a supportive partner. First of all, we transfer $3 billion a year to provinces and territories to help with that training. The training occurs in a number of different ways. Some of the institutions you might be familiar with, youth employment services, for example, would be supported in part by federal funds. Of course, provinces and territories have contributions of their own to skills training in a variety of different ways. We also support them through additional top-ups, as I mentioned, and I won't re-inform you about that. I think you heard my answer around EI measures. And then finally, we partner with provinces and territories in a number of important ways on our youth employment strategy. So we augment those transfers through funding youth employment opportunities across the country. Student work placements are often coordinated through provincial and territorial organizations, and we work very closely with them to make sure that we're not duplicating and stepping on each other's toes, but that really what we're trying to offer is really an approach where people have, I like to say, every door is the right door, where no matter where someone goes in, they're going to find supports. Obviously, there are still gaps, and that's why we have the Spring Economic Update with the $6 billion investment in red skill trades.
That's it. We're going to conclude, to be fair, with Madame LaRouche pour 2 minutes. Madame?
Ms. LaRouche, to be fair, 2 minutes.
Alors, la voici, Madame la Ministre.
Well, here's my question, since I'm allowed one. Minister, food support requests and social assistance, social support requests have been, so numerous in Quebec. Does the government consider that the current budget can meet the magnitude of these needs? What programs could be enhanced, Minister? We're working with Quebec, respectfully. The province has been very good at delivering programs. For each program, we hold meetings with the province. We want to see how the province can improve their own programs. Often, Quebec's programs work very well. And we also take inspiration from their programs when designing our other federal programs.
Merci, Madame LaRouche. Merci.
Thank you, Ms. LaRouche. Thank you, Minister.
Shall vote 1 under the Department of Employment and Social Development, less the amount in the interim supplied carry. On division, Carried on division. Shall vote 5 under the Department of Employment and Social Development, less the amount in the interim supply. Carry on division. Shall vote 1 under the Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization. Carry less the amount in the interim supply. On division. Shall vote 5 under the Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization. Carry less the amount in the interim supply. On division. Carried on division. Shall vote 1 under the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, less the amount in the interim supply. Carry. Carried on division. Shall I report these votes on the main estimates to the House? I will report them to the House on division. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now suspend for a short period of time to prepare for the next panels on homelessness. Suspend for 2 minutes. Suspend. seats as we begin the second hour of today's meeting. I'd like to take a few moments again to remind those that are appearing that were not here before that you have the option of participating in today's meeting in the official language of your choice. To do that, please make sure you're on the right channel. If you're in the room, you have your earpiece on so that you are hearing the presentations. If you're appearing virtually, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface. Choose the official language of your choice. And if there's an interruption in translation, please get my attention and we will suspend. Having said that, one witness that was to appear virtually, Ms. Savage, did not pass the sound quality test to be interpreted, so she will be rescheduled at a later time. Please direct all comments through I, the chair. Wait until I recognize you by name before proceeding. We are now moving into our study on homelessness in Canada, and I would like to now welcome our witness appearing in person from the Calgary Drop-In and Rehab Center Society, Sandra Clarkson, President and Chief Executive Officer. Gilles Beauregard, Coordinator, Table Entourance Rive-Sud. Oui. You both have, you each have 5 minutes for opening statements, up to 5 minutes. We'll begin with you, Ms. Clarkson. You have up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. And thank you for the invitation to appear here today. As mentioned, my name is Sandra Clarkson. I'm the CEO of the Calgary Drop-In Centre, which is one of the largest homeless shelters in the country, able to shelter over 1,000 individuals each night. And I'm also co-chair of the Canadian Shelter Transformation Network, a growing national collaboration of shelter leaders, frontline organizations, researchers, and system partners working together to modernize homeless response systems. This shift is critical to the homelessness response system, or response in Canada. As we're witnessing from coast to coast, homelessness has become more complex. Shelters are increasingly responding to severe addiction, mental illness, chronic health needs, aging, cognitive impairment, and long-term homelessness, while communities also face deep housing affordability pressures and too little supportive housing. Shelters are being asked to serve as emergency response, health stabilization, mental health support, and housing providers of last resort. This is not sustainable or humane. We need a homelessness response that remains housing-focused, is better integrated with health and recovery systems, and is designed for the level of complexity that communities are now facing. Housing must remain the central goal. Homelessness is fundamentally a housing issue, and emergency shelters matter, but they cannot become long-term destinations or carry the full burden of the housing crisis. We need greater investment in supportive housing, deeply affordable housing, transitional housing, medical respite and housing models with integrated supports matched to differing levels of acuity. And buildings alone do not create housing stability. Supportive housing succeeds when there is sustainable funding. Federal investments are strongest when capital development and long-term operational supports are aligned together. Homelessness and addiction cannot be discussed separately. The toxic drug supply has sharply increased the medical and behavioral complexity seen in shelters and on our streets, and one of the clearest themes emerging is the profound impact of addiction and toxic drug supply. This is not simply about public disorder. It is about human vulnerability, trauma, health, and survival. Communities need treatment, detox, mental health supports, harm reduction, and long-term recovery pathways that are integrated with housing responses. Reaching Home should support system transformation. Reaching Home has strengthened coordination in housing-focused practice, but its next phase should also help communities modernize outdated systems. A dedicated homelessness system transformation fund could support integrated healthcare partnerships, stabilization and recovery environments, prevention and diversion, coordinated access modernization, and stronger pathways into housing, so communities can move beyond managing demand and toward better outcomes. This dedicated transformation fund would allow communities to innovate while remaining grounded in measurable outcomes. And policy must reflect the high acuity need, sustainable operations, and prevention. Federal policy should recognize high acuity homelessness as a distinct challenge requiring integrated housing, healthcare, mental health, and recovery supports. It should also align capital investment with sustainable operating funding, support workforce stability, and place greater emphasis on prevention and diversion, including discharge planning, eviction prevention, and Indigenous-led approaches. Communities need integrated federal, provincial responses built around shared outcomes, not isolated funding silos. In closing, homelessness in Canada is more complex and more acute than our current systems were designed to address. The response must stay grounded in housing, but it must also be better integrated with health, addiction, and recovery supports. If we want better outcomes, we must invest not only in emergency response, but in system transformation, sustainable operations, and prevention. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Clarkson. Monsieur Beauregard, pour 5.
Mr. Beauregard, 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gilles Beauregard, and I am the coordinator of the Table Itinérance Rive-Sud and a proud father of 3 children and also a grandfather. So I'm very proud of that, so that's why I'm mentioning it. For 40 years, almost, I have been working on homelessness and drug addiction in Quebec. I'm very proud of that. I'd like to thank everyone. In the 2000s, I saw what happened with homelessness in Montreal, downtown, and it was not easy. And that was one of the first times when there was funding for homeless groups. It was the federal government who started a program called IPAC. It changed names since VCS currently. Over the years, that funding for Quebec has gone from $20 to $35 million. After COVID, it even went up to 80 million, and now annually, I think it's 90 million for Quebec. And so what that means is that the face of Quebec has changed because of that funding. Many projects, well, a lot of funding went to downtown Montreal. And so there was more and more funding for the entire province, so that's a good thing. I think it's important, before I give you my comments on things to improve, I think it's important to talk about the good things that were done. And during that period, there were liberal governments, conservative governments in the past. Everyone has done a good thing or two, and that has to be highlighted. Now, for Quebec, in the beginning of the 2000s, it was mostly the federal government who was financing. So it was mostly the federal government. But over the years, it went to 40%. The provincial government is contributing 40%. The federal government still contributing a lot. But provincially, Quebec is contributing funds. I can't speak for other provinces, including Alberta. But in Quebec, it's been a good thing. The agreement, for those who don't know, there has to be a Canada-Quebec agreement, and that's not always easy to manage, but people come to an agreement. When it comes to Quebec, what's favored is a whole approach. So housing, we want resources. Well, there were street workers, or there are workers who are, working with those in the street, among other things. For the Reaching Home program, which is active right now, there are some things that concern us. For example, we want the money to be indexed. Despite all the good things that are being done and all the money that's being put into this, the homelessness rate is increasing. So we have to continue this fight so that this money be indexed. Often it's an envelope given annually, but it's not indexed. When there's the possibility to renew funds, administratively, there are amounts earmarked, but they can't be, forwarded for the following year. Sometimes it's difficult. Administrative rules are not that easy to navigate. and groups are working on accountability quite a bit. Sometimes it's harder to do this with individuals in a situation of homelessness. Now, there was a count done. We went from 10,000 people in visible homelessness to 12,000. So we expect that trend to continue. Homelessness is all over the province. I think we see it I imagine it's the same in Alberta. You see it all over the province. So it's very worrisome. There were smaller towns that had no homelessness, but now they do. I'm looking at Audrian and Caroline and others here who are very present on the ground. You're seeing it too. There's homelessness everywhere. And so we still have work to do so that we can reverse the trend. And so I'll end on that. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard.
Round of question, Mr. Aitchison for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both the witnesses who are here. And I'm going to start with Ms. Clarkson. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the efforts that you're making at the drop-in center, not just to house people in emergency shelter, but to truly house people? I'd like to get into this business of understanding not just why homelessness is growing, but how we need to address the issue in more long term. That the goal is actually ending homelessness. And I wonder if you could speak specifically to efforts you're making in the drop-in center and what we should be doing differently nationally and provincially.
Thank you for the question. The Calgary Drop-In Centre, in 2018, we made a very conscious choice to become a housing-focused emergency shelter. So every program and service we offer is intended to lead to a positive housing outcome. Since that time, we've housed over 4,000 people, 70% of which are in private market housing without rental subsidy. And have been able to maintain their housing. Our return to shelter rate is less than 5% since that time. And I think that is a fundamental shift as we look at homeless services across the country, is to ensure that every program and service is aimed at a positive housing outcome that can be maintained for people. Also recognizing that might not always stick the first time, but it's about getting to really get clear on the individual needs and matching them to appropriate housing with relevant supports for the time that they need them. And recognizing that everyone who's experienced an episode of homelessness does not necessarily need supportive housing. And CAA should really be considered a last resort for many.
Just a follow-up then. Would you say that there are very well-meaning organizations in the homelessness space that don't approach their operation the same way that you've described, that look to just house as many people as possible?
I think, emergency shelters traditionally have been funded, and the outcomes expected are more output-based, such as sleep nights, meals served, etc., without any expectation of housing outcomes. And so in certainly our experience in the province of Alberta, is our funding agreements were actually incentivizing us to be full and not have flow through shelter, because it was based on a per diem rate per day, which is the wrong metric that we should be incentivizing. It should be about positive housing outcomes. So we've worked very closely with the provincial government to incorporate housing-focused outcomes and language into the core service agreements. So it's moving beyond immediate needs, food, clothing, shelter, to actually finding a pathway out of homelessness and reintegrating back into community.
Would you say that oftentimes, certainly in the past, the approach to addressing homelessness issues in communities all too often was about just sort of creating a Band-Aid, like give some money here to make sure that there aren't people on the street, but that's kind of where it ended? and that we're only now starting to address this in a more comprehensive way. I think it was said that Quebec favors a more holistic approach. What a holistic approach, I would think, is actually ending homelessness. Imagine if our goal was to put you guys out of business, for example. What would change? What would you change federally in terms of whether it's the Reaching Home program, the renewal that's about to start with this government's national housing strategy? What would you change with the way those programs operate to make the job you're doing, the work you're doing, easier?
I think the biggest need that we see is the need for more supportive housing and the operational support to provide that housing, particularly for really complex individuals. At the Calgary Drop-In Centre, we are a low barrier shelter, and the complexity of people we're seeing continues to increase year over year, and the challenge is there is nowhere for them to go. So they continue to languish in shelter, or often are high system users that are very visible in downtown cores, and we need to address that really complex population to help with some of the visibility, which more and more in community, people just don't want to see it. They don't really care what happens. They just don't want to see it.
Right.
And I think we have an opportunity to really modernize our homeless serving systems of care to really be relentlessly housing focused, from prevention to getting somebody into recovery, treatment, and housing. So that's what I would recommend, is that we're looking at the continuum and working together with provincial partners to ensure that we're all rowing in the same direction and not operating in silos.
Seconds.
Thank you. I hope to have a little more opportunity to talk some more. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Monsieur Joseph, pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Joseph, 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, through you, I will ask my question to Mr. Beauregard, and thank you for being here today. And I thank Ms. Clarkson as well. Mr. Beauregard, you talked about prevention. A number of experts say that some of the most efficient methods to reverse the trend. Well, give us your opinion. Do you think that what they've said is true? Yes, prevention is important. At some point, let's look at young people. Let's say they start a cycle. They leave youth centers, and then they find themselves with no support, and they end up in the streets. That's not what we want. There aren't a lot of life paths in homelessness, so that's a quick intervention. When people can reach out to someone like that quickly, that's better, because we don't want them to become homeless. Like you said, ending homelessness, that's a significant way we can prioritize. There's a new phenomenon, and I'm sure that Ms. Clarkson is seeing this in Calgary. People who work, people who have a job, but they end up in our centers. That makes no sense. So we have to work with that kind of clientele. It's quite complex. But some of them are very complex, but these ones are not as complex. They're not very used to homelessness. They're going through a difficult time in their life. So when we have young people, 18 to 25 years old, that's an important profile of people to reach out to. When there's a complicated situation, we have to establish connections. You've got family members that have struggled with drug addiction. And so it takes time. You have to really establish trust with those individuals. You can't expect that, you can just wave your magic wand. We have some profiles of homelessness all over Canada. It can be young people, seniors. We're seeing more seniors, people who are working. So we've got very different profiles. And we have to address each of them based on their unique situation. Indigenous people, their situation is different. People from Manitoba. Well, in Winnipeg, they've seen the unique situation there. So these are very complex scenarios. And in Quebec, what I can tell you is that what we're doing well is working together in an ecosystem. We've got a number of ecosystems in Quebec. We've got about 15. Trois-Rivières, Longueuil, Montreal, Laval. Each ecosystem addresses their unique problems differently. So that changes the deal when people work together. Cities, police officers, community groups, municipal offices, everybody works hand in hand. That really makes a difference when people work in partnership, because we don't have one solution, we have a number of them. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard. We don't have a lot of time. Some experts say that prevention costs less money than pulling somebody out of homelessness. Could you elaborate on that? Well, there was a study. There is a Union of Quebec Municipalities that carried out a study on the cost, and I think they said it was about $70,000 for a homeless person. Of course, there's always an associated cost. Perhaps there would be a way to look at homelessness from an economic standpoint, but they're still human beings. They're our brothers and sisters. So that's important that we remember that. We are all collectively responsible. And so if I understand you correctly, you're saying that prevention does cost less. Yes, indeed. Mr. Beauregard. Now, affordable housing. People say that's the main reason for homelessness. Do you think that the objective of Homes Canada at the federal level, the idea of building affordable homes on a large scale, we're talking billions of dollars in housing and supports. Do you think this is a concrete solution that could reverse the trend? Well, I do applaud the investment of large amounts of money. We're going to be happy about that, right? That's an investment in our projects. Well, we don't exactly know how it's going to unfold. Building Canada Homes is unfolding gradually, but we have to make sure that it doesn't go against the Reaching Home program, for which we're asking for indexation. Mr. Beauregard, there's a 2026 report from Serrano which had determined that for Quebec alone, the economic cost every year for individuals in a homelessness situation from 2023, well, the numbers were quite conservative, $750 million. Should we focus on the fight against homelessness as an economic and social endeavor? Listen, economic, yes, but it's important to remember that behind each homeless person, earlier I was in Ottawa. I was walking around and I saw some pretty crazy things. My heart as a father is sensitive to this. Yes, economically, it can be seen from that vantage point, but these are still human beings. And nonetheless, it is unacceptable, the things that we're seeing. For example, people lying on the ground in Ottawa. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Ms. Clarkson, for offering a perspective from Western Canada. I will take my first question to Mr. Beauregard. Bravo for your work. How many years did you say you've been involved in this area? 40 years. Wow. That's amazing. And you're working in an area that's not always easy. As you said, things are we're really seeing quite the phenomenon in Montreal and the South Shore. But I'm in around Grand Bay, and there's a lot of homelessness, and outside of the metropolitan areas. And often these individuals are less visible, but the rates are rising. We are talking about the number of people, visible homeless individuals, but there are others who are, homeless, but it's hidden. Women, for example, who accept to go sleep on someone's couch in exchange for certain services. That's not always easy. Or a testimony that I heard last week, a woman and her daughter, and they're obliged to stay with an uncle in his house. in a house where the, sanitation is, borderline acceptable because she couldn't find anything else. How is this reality of hidden homelessness showing itself? And what's happening outside of the major city centers? Yes, the hidden cases are more common outside of major city centers because it's hard to see. One of the issues is that, Grand Bay is an example, outside of the big city centers. It's difficult for our teams to go towards these individuals because they're very far away. So when they go meet with these individuals, well, it's quite long and they don't get to see many of them. Now, there was a meeting in Sherbrooke recently on homelessness and the significant connection that you establish with people. That's important. The connection you make when people are far away, well, it's very hard to establish such connections. I've got some families where I have to go see the person, and I see them regularly and we become close. So you really have to make those connections, and it's a huge challenge for groups in Quebec and everywhere else, I'm sure too, when it comes to hidden homelessness. You have to be very proactive with your approach, not reactive. You have to go out and find the individuals, identify them. It's important to have, what do we call that? There are people who actually go out and do the scouting. Yes, they go out and more in Quebec, what we're proud of is our policing services are close to them. They don't just intervene in the traditional way. There's a lot of scouting out that they do. And so I really encourage that. I think in Trois-Rivières, there are things like that too. Longueuil, Montréal, we have the EMIS teams. So it's very important that there be a lot of people on the ground. They don't have to necessarily be intervening or responding directly, but they at least sound the alarm and say, look, something's about to happen here. I visited the police station. The Grand Bay police officers, they too have expertise now with community police officers, and they're informed of the homelessness situation. So I had a chance to speak with them over the last 2 weeks. It was very interesting. They're also mobile traveling units, and their job is to go around and identify areas of concern. And so in Saint César, there's also a project underway. And the idea is to move around and go find out where people are. When there are large areas of land, they have to go figure out where those individuals are located. Now, the federal programs, did they take into account that regional reality and that of hidden homelessness? And talk to us about reaching home. There are new communities who would like to, well, in fact, the South Shore and Grand Bay is still not a designated community, and so they don't get to have their piece of the pie with reaching home. Yes, indeed. For those of you who weren't present, the concept is that in Canada, we had designated zones, about 40 of them, about 15 in Quebec. Calgary was one of them, Edmonton, Vancouver, Winnipeg. In Quebec, there were a number of them as well. But unfortunately, there were some places that weren't designated. At the time, it wasn't so bad because homelessness was really in the city centers, but things have changed since then, and it has spread. Now there's less funding because they're not designated. So this concept of designated zones could be something to be revisited as part of your exercise. One thing that changed is that there are a number of zones that are kind of orphan zones with no funding. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Our networks are addressing that more and more. The designated zone concept is being used less as an intervention tool. On the South Shore, there was money from the federal government, but they didn't inject money based on the designated zone principle. So that's something that needs to be reviewed, I think. I also received a letter from the CDC Richelieu. Yes, they were explaining to what extent they really need more resources to intervene because they're seeing the needs rise for these resources. One last question. Well, I would remind you of what I said earlier about follow-ups. We have a street working organization and we talk about support. That's what we need, wraparound supports. Because yes, shelters are great, but we also need support. Thank you, Mr. Beauregard. Okay. Ms. Goodridge, for 5 minutes.
In communities, and specifically, Ms. Clarkson, I had the opportunity of touring the Calgary Drop-In Centre back in August of 2023 and got to see firsthand the spectacular work you guys do serving very vulnerable populations, and specifically got to see the successes from your guys' targeted encampment program, and met many of the individuals that you took out of encampments and got to hear their stories and their journey towards recovery. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that program, because so many communities are having problems with encampments, but their provincial governments or their local governments haven't taken the leadership that Calgary and Alberta took to actually dismantle those encampments. And so I was wondering if you could speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. During COVID, we had significant encampments build up outside of our main shelter facility, which is in the downtown core of Calgary. And it was becoming very unsafe for individuals that were out there, people trying to seek access to our services, for our staff to come into work. And we approached the Calgary Police Service with an idea to work collaboratively to address the safety issues of those encampments with a social service first, enforcement second type of approach. And we found there were many, many individuals that were in the encampment that were actually housed in community, that were using tents, et cetera, as cover for organized crime. And so we really got to, we took the time to figure out who was who in there and who was vulnerable and who was being predatory, and really targeted social service interventions for those that were the most vulnerable, and worked with them first. We actually housed 32 individuals directly from encampment. As part of that exercise, it was called Operation East Side, so highly collaborative with multiple departments in the city, and it worked very well, and that is something that we will continue to advocate for each and every time.
Thank you so much. Your guys is one of the things that I find sets you apart from many other organizations that I've had the opportunity of touring that are in that no barrier or very low barrier homelessness space is your recovery-oriented system of care. And I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more about the successes you see of getting people into recovery and on their path towards treatment.
Yeah, I think with the increase in toxicity of the drug supply, the opioid crisis, the impacts of that, at the Calgary Drop-In Centre in 2018, which was the first year we started measuring or counting the number of drug poisonings that we responded to. We had 87 in 2018. In 2023, we had over 3,000. So significant increase. And so we thought we can't just keep, yes, it's important to keep people alive, 100%. Like, they need to be alive to take the next step. But it's not enough. And so we advocated with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions in Alberta to provide medically supported detox or withdrawal management, as well as a recovery transition program for individuals, so that we could actually offer something beyond naloxone. And it has become a very critical and central point of the work that we do. The intention there really was about opening up more pathways to housing. If people are really dealing with acute addiction issues, they're not going to be successful in housing, so this was a way to open that up.
On behalf of Albertans, I want to sincerely thank you. the amazing work you've done is truly spectacular. There's one particular individual that I had the opportunity of meeting when I went on that tour who is now living independently and has their children back and is doing spectacularly well. And I've kept in touch with them. And that started with the seed you guys planted when you allowed them to access recovery, and you met them where they were at, but you didn't just leave them there, like so many other places have done. And so from the very bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich, Monsieur Joseph. Monsieur Joseph, pour 5 minutes. No?
Mr. Joseph, 5 minutes, no?
Madame de Rocher, pour 5 minutes.
Madame Desrochers, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Allow me to first thank you for being here with us. But even more importantly, I'd like to thank you for the work that you do every day. It's extremely important work. It's work that we hope you won't always have to do because we hope to end this phenomenon. But thank you for the work you do day after day for these people who need it most. Mr. Beauregard, you mentioned that we are already working, or that that people are reflecting on the renewal of the housing strategy, which will include the fight against homelessness. And over the past weeks and months, I've done a lot of work on the ground by reaching out to different organizations around different parts of Canada. I hear a lot about the importance of prevention, the importance of working upstream. Yes, we have to work on both fronts, of course. We have to support those who are experiencing homelessness, but at the same time, we need to work upstream and act sooner. Reaching home, you talked about designated zones. We really want to hear recommendations. And Ms. Clarkson, I'd like to hear you a little more on that program, on the recommendations that you made about the initiative that could help. But I want to know how we can reassess reaching home, to know what's working and address what's not. And also the program for ending encampments. It was renewed. Initially, it was a 2-year program for emergency situations, but it was renewed for a 3rd year. It was another $125 million because we heard that you had really helped organizations and there was a better understanding of what was happening on the ground. So perhaps that will be my first question on the program to end encampments. Just a quick answer because I do have some other questions. Do you think this really helped to enhance the coordination between the workers in the cities where you're present, a better understanding of the data so that there can be more work done with the individuals so that they can be taken care of, the ones who are in the encampments?
Encampment funding was incredibly beneficial. I think the challenge that we had in Calgary, we spun up an encampment shelter working in partnership with 2 other service organizations that did outreach, one Indigenous focused, and then also transitional housing for people leaving encampments. The outcomes in that program in an 8-month period were extremely high. Unfortunately, the funding ended and then started up again for just another 1-year period. So it's really difficult to run a program for 6 or 8 months without multi-year funding. So I would recommend that multi-year funding, operational sustainable funding is considered on the encampment side. And do you want to?
Ben, on est à même place, Sandra. On est à même place.
Sandra, we're in the same situation.
Tardivement.
Funding is coming too late. So when we put in place the program, let's say we do that in September, well, from September to March, well, the bulk of the work happens over the summer. Yes, we're happy when there's funding, like Sandra said, but if there was the ability, well, if the window could be longer, we could have more predictability. Of course, this phenomenon evolves and it's not easy to address. So, yes, for that, but with better programming. Perfect. Thank you. You mentioned, Mr. Beauregard, the study done by the UMQ saying that it costs about $70,000 per year for the government.
We know that the support of provinces across Canada is not even with respect to coming to the table with wraparound services. And I'd like to hear you, maybe Mrs. Clarkson, because I know very well, I'm very familiar with the situation in Quebec, on Alberta and other provinces that you'd be familiar with respect to that piece of support for transition, because in Build Canada Home we have $1 billion, but it is predicated on the province coming to the table and providing that support, right?
Yes.
Can you just short answer, please?
Sorry?
Go ahead. Yes,
Short
answer.
The provincial partnership is absolutely critical, and I think ideally working towards the same outcomes. And I know in the province of Alberta that the encampment funding is a very great example. Bilateral funding agreement took quite a long time to work through those details, but I think you're right. There has to be coordination between the federal government and provincial governments if we're going to really make a dent in this issue.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Desrochers. Madame Larouche, pour
Thank you, Ms. Durocher. Madame Larouche, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To come back to what I was saying earlier about financial funding needs, if we give a number to it, about $900,000 per year that is lacking, that's just for the Richelieu area. And for interventions, there's Action Dépendance, Maison des Jeunes, Passe-moi la POC. There's a number of organizations. And there are services, 5 of these organizations are endangered and they might lose their funding by the 31st of March. I got this message recently. As for the encampments, I had a roundtable meeting and there were people from different organizations who benefit from this. Montpassant, Le Passage Notre-Dame in Grand Bay, to name just a few. But last fall, they wanted to have that renewed after the 31st of March. So there were amounts, but this uncertainty, this lack of predictability, well, tell us, how does that hurt your organizations and the work that you do? Well, when we don't get any news about the renewal, March 31st, let's say it's the 1st of March, the teams that we have at the moment, we have to tell them, look, you might be out of a job soon.
On va te donner on appelle ça le 4% là, au Québec, là.
Well, we tell them, we'll give them their 4%, that's how we call it. But, we're talking about expertise here because these individuals have been establishing connections with these people. They know the work on the ground, and that's what's at the heart of it all, the relationship established with the individuals. We work in teams, we're part of the management, but it's the on-the-ground teams that are affected. And this is huge when we don't have the ability to say, listen, we have no predictability. That generates all kinds of uncertainty. January, February, staff members start to wonder, okay, maybe I'll start looking for another job. I don't know if you've already worked with people who are experiencing homelessness, but it's not easy. We have to have, very, has to be very unique, strong individuals. We need predictability, of course. The agreements that we have, can we have agreements that go beyond 1 year, 2-3 year agreements, as long as possible, the longest duration possible? That way we can develop programs that are adequate, because adequate programs need to be built up over time. Thank you, Ms. Larouche.
Very much, Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for taking the time to be here to share their experience with us. And I also want to thank you guys for doing the hard work and recognizing the dignity of a person, because people have dignity, right? And I know that I really appreciate it, that and the work that you're doing. I find sometimes this place is very black and white, and that's not life. life is literally the gray. And a lot of policies that are made are boxed into you either fit here or you fit here. And if you don't fit in either, then too bad, so sad. But it's important that we have that gray area and people recognizing the importance of that. Because I believe that's where real change and transformation happens, is when we look at the dignity of the person and meet them where they're at and give them a hand up, right? And that's in conjunction, obviously, with the provincial and municipal governments as well, right, with the wraparound services, which is also essential to this. I always use the saying, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And that's the same with us, right? We can do everything, but if there's not that will there, but that's where we meet people where they're at and help ignite that. So I want to thank you guys for doing what you're doing. My first question for Ms. Clarkson, if I may, from your perspective at the Calgary Drop-In Centre, how has homelessness in Calgary evolved over time in terms of who is coming through your doors and the challenges that they are presenting?
Well, it certainly has changed considerably in the last 10 years. I think, as I mentioned earlier in my statement, just the increase of the impact of the toxic drug supply and the amount of addiction that we're seeing, compounded with mental health. So the complexity is unlike anything I think any of us could ever have predicted, right? And it's highlighting the gaps in the mental health system, the healthcare system, and at the Calgary Drop-In Centre, we really truly are the catch-all. We work with people that nobody else will, and the work is getting harder and harder and harder. And although we're really good at getting people housed as quickly as possible and as sustainably as possible, there's more and more folks that are showing up with those real complexities where there is nowhere for them to go, and so we need to really address that.
Are you seeing more people then with comorbidities?
I would say yes, 100%, and I think just the complexity of the mental health and addiction, and then with that, hypoxic brain injury from repeated overdose,
Sure.
et cetera.
Unintended consequences.
Where there is not a lot of rehabilitative runway there.
Okay. So I don't know if you're able to answer this question, though. How much of the current demand is tied to housing affordability versus health-related factors such as the mental health and substance abuse?
Well, I think ultimately housing is the answer to homelessness. Like, we can't get away from that.
Yep.
I think certainly in the city of Calgary, the number of deeply affordable, so affordable is great, but that's not who is that. That's not meeting the need of this population. So it's that deeply affordable and supportive housing that is a critical component that is currently significantly underserved. So in addition to the health supports that you're talking about, right now we're undergoing a study of, we're looking at what would it take to house everybody at the Calgary Drop-In Centre tomorrow, and doing a really deep dive on what the needs are and housing needs are, support needs of every individual. And we're estimating right now of a shelter population on average, which is about 800 individuals per night, that over 200 of them would be requiring some of that higher level of support, some 24/7 high needs support.
So do you guys track long-term outcomes?
Yes.
So are you able to, or do you have any information that you can, even if you don't have it with you today, table to this committee, just what the success rate is of people then staying housed long-term after they leave?
Yeah, what I can share is that since 2018, when we started shifting our focus to be housing focused, our return to shelter rate since that time is less than 5%, and we've housed close to 4,000 people.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. That's a very impressive outcome, Ms. Clarkson. Pour conclure avec Monsieur Joseph.
To conclude, Mr. Joseph, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will reiterate through you. Well, I'd like to address Ms. Clarkson. Thank you, Ms. Clarkson. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the work that you do. And Mr. Beauregard as well for over 40 years. I'd like to ask you a more specific question about youth homelessness. What is the proportion of young people who are homeless in your communities? And based on your experience, how do they experience this homelessness? Tell us.
We're an adult serving organization, but in terms of what we're noticing in the city of Calgary, there is significant numbers of youth homelessness, but we've been able to, with our community partners, have done a really great job of trying to intervene very quickly, as you mentioned earlier, the importance of that quick intervention. In fact, they've actually reduced the number of youth shelter beds in the city of Calgary because they are able to do that prevention diversion work quite effectively. And I think continuing to invest in that upstream effort is a critical component of this solution.
Merci, Madame Clarkson. Je vais m'adresser aussi à Monsieur Gilles parce que nous savons.
Thank you, Mrs. Clarkson. And Mr. Gilles, you know, in Quebec, as you mentioned, well, we've learned that there are risks for young people. Could you elaborate a little more? Tell us what the main risks are for youth homelessness in Quebec. Risks related to homelessness among young people. Well, as Sandra said,
Le risque, bon, c'est d'avoir des.
Well, the risks. The young people won't do their income tax. They get fines. They get involved with the police. They join street gangs. It's an attractive scene. Sometimes that's why you don't want people to go towards the resources. In Longueuil, we have a large shelter. There are a lot of adults that are undergoing chronic homelessness, but there is a center for youth, and we direct them to that center so that they'll have housing for about 15 young people. We prefer to direct them towards resources of that sort because there's more support and more monitoring. So in the large shelters, encampments, those aren't good places for rejoining society. They have more capacity to support these young people. That's a good way to help them, and we intervene quickly. Thank you, Ms. Gilles. Mrs. Clarkson now. You spoke about the importance of investing in all the spheres, all the continuum of services. Can you elaborate more specifically on that aspect?
I think certainly when I think about system transformation, as I mentioned, we're working with a system that was designed 25 years ago for very different population needs. And so I think that system transformation fund is a very important part of looking at that holistic continuum of care and having the ability to do things like the housing focused transformation that we did, for instance, that's shown amazing results. I think it's a recognition that from prevention and diversion through to housing with supports and long-term supports that may be required for some, without looking at the entire system of care and the continuum of care, we will continue to simply manage the issue as opposed to work towards solving the issue.
Je vais me rediriger vers M. Gilles Beauregard. Monsieur Gilles Beauregard.
Now, over to Mr. Beauregard. Do you believe that more predictability and flexibility around funding would allow organizations to dedicate more resources to direct services rather than to administrative management? Yes, most definitely. And I said that earlier. That's a major issue. We've been experiencing this, well, since the very beginning, really. Regardless of the name of the program, that has always been the case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Joseph and Mr. Beauregard.
You referenced earlier high systems users. Could you just explain high systems user?
Yeah, how we refer to that in the city of Calgary anyway are individuals who are having significant number of interactions with police, emergency room, shelters, social service providers.
Okay. Thank you. I thought it was demands on the capital system. It's the other outside. Thank you for the clarity. And thank you so much for your compelling testimony you gave the committee this morning. With that, committee members, we will meet again on Monday. We will adjourn. Merci à tous.
Thank you, everyone.